Hey friends, and welcome to Ears to Hear. In this episode, I'd like to share with you some thoughts that I gathered together in response to a friend who was asking about Exodus chapter 3 and Mount Sinai, where Moses encountered the burning bush. I'll just read to you a couple of verses. One day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. "This is amazing," Moses said to himself. "Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it." When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, "Moses, Moses!" "Here I am," Moses replied. "Don't come any closer," the Lord warned. "Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. This text doesn't quite fit our modern context in the way that we think about divine presence, and yet it certainly fits the ancient worldview. The ancients tended to think that many of the highest gods lived upon mountains, and in this case, this divine mountain is actually known for the presence of deity. I mean, that's why it's called Sinai, the divine mountain. Whether that's thinking after the fact, referring back to that mountain that Moses encounters the God of his ancestors at. However, Moses encounters the God of his fathers, his ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, at the mountain through a bush that is on fire but unconsumed. And just reflecting on this for a moment, again, another element associated in the ancient worldview with deities is fire. And in particular, this deity, Yahweh, the God of Israel, is known in the Psalms, for instance, as having flames of fire as his ministers and messengers. So we begin to connect, in fact, fire with this particular deity. In the book of Deuteronomy, this mountain, instead of being called Sinai, is called Horeb, which is that flaming, fiery mountain, as we may translate it. The name actually begins to take on the very significance of the mountain of fire, not quite like the mountain of doom in The Lord of the Rings, since this is not intended to be something to terrify because of evil, but something quite terrifying because it is the presence of a holy God. This would also draw upon the ancestor stories of Abraham, where in this God making covenant with him, there is a torch of fire that passes right through the midst of the carved animals as Yahweh makes covenant with him. So it seems only fitting that there should be a fire that passes before Moses, that calls and beckons to him, from which he hears the voice of Yahweh calling him into this holy ministry, this holy message of ministry. This is also evidenced later on when Elijah will gather together the peoples of Israel to discern which God is truly God, Baal or Yahweh of Israel. And of course, it is the God who answers by fire, Yahweh, who doesn't just consume the sacrifice, but also answers from heaven, consuming even the stones, the water, and everything that was offered up to the Lord on Carmel. This is the same God, of course, at the end of Exodus, who answers with fire, dedicating his house, his tent, where his presence will dwell in the midst of his people. It is the fire, as it were, that passes from that burning bush to the mountaintop, and now to the midst of the people, having traveled with them through the wilderness, bringing them out of Egypt in the pillar of fire. This is perhaps also to give us pause as we consider that John the Baptizer mentions when Jesus comes, or the one after him comes, he would baptize in the Holy Spirit and fire. We've tended to think of this in positive terms, the and fire, but John clearly shows a sense of this is the fires of judgment. It is for consuming the chaff. Not really the kind of fire we want to experience. And yet, while John envisions the baptism of fire as being for judgment, when we go to Acts chapter 2, we encounter the Holy Spirit poured out and evidence once again on the mountain of God, Zion, where flames of fire are upon the heads of the saints as they receive the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And we'll give him pause once again, as we see with John the Revelator, the very throne of the Almighty with thundering and lightning, and a sea of fire before him at one scene in the unfolding drama of the Revelation, and where we encounter the sevenfold Spirit of the Lord around the throne, the seven torches that never go out. And these are somehow connected to the Spirit of the God of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who made covenant on his divine mountain, that by the end of the book, we see the city come down out of heaven, a new Jerusalem, unto the new heavens and new earth, where John has been taken up by the Spirit upon a great high mountain to behold the presence of the God of Israel with this people, gathered together, the city founded upon Israel, and the gates opening with the names of the apostles to include the church of all those many tongues, tribes, and nations who would gather to the great mountain of God. And there behold the fire that is without end, that does not consume, but forever burns, cleansing, purifying, making whole. And this is just a little journey through the scriptures in reflecting on Exodus chapter 3. Thanks for joining me today.